Good afternoon. It's great to be with you today. I'm so happy to be out at the home of Ed and Karen Stallman. Karen invited me out to show me around her beautiful flower gardens. Thanks so much, Karen.
Well, thank you, Tammy, and we're really pleased to have you. We're here on the farm. This is the farm that I grew up on with my parents and my 4 sisters and 2 brothers, just outside of Ellis Grove. And of course, I love the farm, and I love seeing the crops and all the plants growing. But my passion, especially in the summer, is flower gardening. And so, as I think about everybody being like us, not everybody, but most people being like us, and staying home and staying safe and social distancing, I thought it would be a great opportunity to bring the outdoors to you and to share a little bit about our home and our flowers here and talk a little bit about what we're growing.
Tell us about some of the flowers and plants you have out here in front of your home.
Well, let me first offer my disclaimer.
Okay.
I have a background in agriculture, but I'm certainly not an expert on plants or gardening. You'll see some weeds in my flowers. You would see some flowers that I can't identify, some that I bought on clearance and planted and I don't even know what they are. But we're going to start here under the overcup oak, native to Illinois, here next to the road. And what you'll see in my flower beds are all perennials. The only annuals that I plant are in just a few container plants. So here by the road, I have a lot of Shasta daisies. I love Shasta daisies, and they like to spread, and they're so pretty when they bloom. I use a lot of yarrow, and you'll see yarrow around the flower beds today. And I also use a lot of Stella d'Or lilies. And I also love hostas. So anytime that we have shade, I like to add in hostas. Tammy, one of the things that I want to mention right off the bat is that my belief in flower gardening is here we naturalize. So you'll be able to see throughout the beds that we don't have perfect things planted in place. We really like to fill in, and here it is survival of the fittest. I do not water anything other than my container plants. If it gets to be July or August and we're in a drought and I see that we're going to lose some plants, I'll start watering, but ordinarily not. And I mentioned accessories. Well, here by the flagpole, one of the things that we added in is an old school bell. And this is a school bell from the Walnut Hill School near Diamond Cross. My husband Ed farms over in that area, and if any of your audience remembers the Walnut Hill one-room schoolhouse, this was the school bell, and we wanted to put it on display here among the flowers. And here you'll see that I have a lot of irises. These are actually petite irises that I say only bloom for about 3 days. They bloom so short, but I do love them. And then I use a bit of the yarrow and border this with lyripede. We'll move on around. This definitely gives you an example of the naturalizing effect. So this bed is filled with a lot of different flowers. You can see the yarrow throughout. You can see cone flowers that are just getting ready to bloom. I've got purple cone flowers and then a few white cone flowers. I've got some what we call red hot poker back here a little bit that is just starting to bloom. And then again, I've got the petite irises in the background. A couple fountains in this area. I like to have fountains. I like angels, so you'll see a couple angel statues and a couple angel fountains. My favorite is my garden angel. That is this statue that I say overlooks and oversees the flower gardens and also the farm. One of the things that I added in last year is an oak leaf hydrangea, which is this white oak leaf plant. I love hydrangeas, so I've got a lot of hydrangeas throughout the flower beds. It's the only oak leaf that I've got, and I particularly like that variety. So it's come back this year, doing strong, taking off. So I'm glad to see that. I've got a couple hydrangeas in the background that you maybe can't see close to the house. There's a couple that are just now blooming pink. And then next to the windows, what you see are some tall phlox, and those will bloom pink tall phlox. If we come on around, I've got a few Asiatic lilies that are just starting to bloom, a couple boxwoods in urns by the front doors. If you hear that background meow, that's a barn cat that has decided to join us, Patches. Wanted to be in on the tour also. I've got a lot of perennial salvia, and one of the things that keeps me busy throughout the summer is a lot of deadheading. So I will deadhead a lot of this, not my coneflowers, but I will deadhead the yarrow and the salvia, and it will keep blooming. And what I mean by deadheading is that I'll come along when it gets to be spent about like this and starting to turn a little bit brown. I'll cut that off with cutters, and then that will all continue to rebloom, and that will rebloom throughout the summer. And that's what I like about perennials, is they're, to me, kind of low maintenance. They'll come back year after year and keep filling in, but also I can get many of them to rebloom. So if you scan this, you can really see that naturalizing effect of just a lot of flowers mixed in to make the bed just a solid bed of blooming flowers. Here by the house, I have filled in a lot with lyripy. So these are lyripy along the border. These are lyripy along with Stella d'Or lilies, and I'll also deadhead these, and then they'll continue to rebloom. The little ground cover that you see a little bit better down this way, just now blooming, is a creeping jenny. And that's a good ground cover that just keeps spreading each year. So eventually that will fill in to give me a little bit of color with the yellow, but also be something solid here along the brick pathway. We'll move on around to this bed and follow the rock path. Here again, the petite irises that just finished blooming. They'll bloom for about a week, and these bloom yellow, and they bloomed about last week. They just now have backed off, have been finished blooming. Here I've got more coneflowers, but also a lot of black-eyed Susans. That's something else that I like to fill in with, and those black-eyed Susans will bloom so pretty. We're just a little bit early. By about next week, we'll see blooms on those. This is the north side of the house. So here in the shade, there again, I love hostas. So I fill in with a lot of different varieties of hostas. You'll see a lot of the grindstones that we use also as accessories. My husband Ed really enjoys collecting these different sizes and different types of grindstones. So you'll see those different places. This planter, which is just now coming on, this would be an example of a place that I would plant annuals in a container. This is an old hand washing sink from a school that was in Missouri. So if any of you remember from school, whenever you held your hands under the kind of sprinkler to wash your hands, this is one of those. So we managed to get it here and use it as a planter, and it's worked very nice. I've just not been able to get anything to overwinter in the water fountain, which doesn't surprise me for it being a container. So we'll come on around and you can see the hostas again, coneflowers, more irises, more stellas. Back here I've got some taller lilies that are, you can just see budding, not yet blooming. And the little plant at this end is, I'm sure, familiar to many of you, the lamb's ears. And you can certainly tell that if you fill a leaf. I've got some lamb's ear here, and we'll see some around, again, at the back of the house. Across the driveway, we've used a border of sandstone for this bed. Now, it's a hot day in June, so we see the hydrangeas are a little bit stressed right now. I've got a little bit of bee balm, which is this dark red color. That's some bee balm that will bloom now. And then I've got a little bit of a trellis, or a little bit of a cone trellis, where I've got just a wild grapevine going up that trellis. But this bed is where I've got a lot of stellas, some hydrangeas, which we'll see in the back. We follow the rock path down. I also use butterfly bushes, and you can see these pink phlox now starting to bloom on this side of the house. This will be a purple butterfly bush. And the newest addition to this flower bed is this year I planted a hydrangea tree, and it's just starting to bloom. So this hydrangea tree will fill in nicely here, and it will fill out and get a little bit taller, but I'm glad to see these white blooms just now coming on. I've got some mums, so I've got flowers throughout the year. So my mums I'll give them a haircut about the middle of July. Once they start to bloom, I'll cut those little blooms off. So in the fall, they'll be nice and big and green and start blooming. We'll step down here in the shade. Here I've got a few hostas. You can see the violas that were very beautiful in the spring are just now starting to die back. So those violas will die back, and then next spring they'll fill in again here along the paths. Hydrangea bushes here. There again, it's early June, so it's a little bit early for those hydrangeas to be blooming. I'll mention about these plants around the cypress tree. These are actually wild spiderwort. So some of you may have spiderwort. This was a start that I actually dug out of the woods. That's a spring woodland flower. So I brought it up here to the house and planted it around the cypress tree. What I've learned about the wild spiderwort is that they really like to spread. So I started with just a few around the tree. They bloom beautifully, a pretty purple in the spring. They'll die back a little bit. There again, I'll deadhead, I'll cut those back, and then they will rebloom. And this fall, they'll be reblooming. But if you look, none of these were planted. These are just wild spiderworts that continue to pop up different places. So as you're planting, that's something to keep in mind, is how plants are going to, of course, spread, and how they spread, and some spread more than others. I'll mention a little bit about the mulch that I use. I like to mix mulch and pine needle straw. So I use double shredded hardwood mulch, and then I mix in pine needle straw. Now this isn't just pine needles that you buy or that you pick up maybe under your pine tree. These come in, I buy them from a nursery. They are baled and come in from the southern states. So it's pine needle straw that's a little bit longer, and it will last quite a while. So I like to mix in that pine needle straw with some mulch. And then as far as maintenance, like I said, I divide plants, but really only if they get too big, or if I'm going to fill in empty spots, or if I share with my friends and family. And that's a great thing to do if you can find somebody that likes plants as much as you do, and you trade plants, and I do a lot of that. But for fertilizer, I'm lucky enough to have access to cow manure, and that's my secret, I guess. So each fall, all of these beds, I'll come through with a weed eater and cut all of those off. All my perennials, I'll cut off before the hard freeze. And then I'll use very dry cow manure that's been in a pile for about a year, and I'll do a thin layer of cow manure on all of the plants. And then by spring, I think that really helps fertilize and help them come up healthy. And of course, this year with all of the rain, I keep saying it's like we live in a terrarium, and the plants have done very well. And a bird bath here around the back, and you can see some of the hydrangeas just starting to bloom. And these hydrangeas, both of these bushes will be a light pink. Okay, so we're here at the back of the house, and I just want to point out in this bed, some lilies that are just getting ready to bloom. I had mentioned the lamb's ear. The accessories back here are some flower pots, but somebody left their bicycle in the flower bed. And then a fall spirea, which is just starting to bloom a little bit too. And then you'll see some cone flowers. We might think that this is a new bed, and in one way it might be, but it's really a bed that I kind of had to redo. Because if you remember me saying, sometimes plants pop up where they want. Well, this is an example of a bed that I had, and I love ornamental grasses. So at this end, at one time I planted some ornamental oaks, and you can see I still have ornamental oaks. I love them. They turn a beautiful color in the fall, but they spread very rapidly. And so ornamental oats are really not my friend. They filled in this bed completely. And I didn't want that. I didn't want a bed of just ornamental oats. So this year, last fall, I decided to cut back a lot of those and add in some different things. So you can see I've got a butterfly bush, some lilies that are blooming, some bee balm, some tall phlox, a few small hydrangeas, a couple butterfly bushes that will fill in along the edge, a lilac tree. And then if you see my cages behind me, I decided to do a very mini garden and plant some tomatoes and some zucchini. Now the accessory that I'll point out in this garden is what I decided to try while I was here staying safe, and that is making a gazing ball out of a bowling ball. So it was a easy enough procedure to take an old bowling ball and put some primer on it and then spray it with some mirror-like paint. And all of this bed, then a lot of it stays in the shade of another overcup oak, which if you're not sure about an overcup oak, that's the acorn where it has a very big cap on the acorn. That's an overcup. So at the end of the propane tank is an ornamental honeysuckle, and that's a vine that spreads pretty rapidly. I've got it on a trellis, and it has really climbed that trellis and gotten really full over just a matter of a couple years. Now here on the side of the house, some more of the irises, a lot of the purple coneflowers. That fills these in, and then for the winter I like to have a few evergreens. So here on each side of the fountain I've got some boxwoods and some other evergreens to fill in. So in the winter we've got a little bit of color, green color also in the flower beds. That's about the only evergreen that I have throughout the beds. On the back patio is really the only annuals you'll see, and like I said, those are in container plants. So I've done just a few geraniums here with sweet potato vines. What I'm most proud of is that I was able to overwinter a couple hydrangeas. So this hydrangea bush and that hydrangea bush, your audience that grows flowers would know it's very difficult to overwinter container plants. So I was able to put these on the south side of the house and do a little bit of cover. And sure enough, I planted these last year and they overwintered and they've come out really nice this year. So they're just getting ready to bloom. So I'm anxious to see these two nice big hydrangeas, and hopefully I can overwinter again this coming year. We'll come around to the side of the house. And this would be the south side of the house where I had filled in with Stella d'Or. This gets a lot of shade, so I have highlighted this area with 3 of the big blue hostas. I like those large hostas that come out, and it breaks up the Stellas a little bit, and so it makes it a nice bed with yellow and green right outside the sunroom. And so for us, we're able to look out and see a nice big bed and some good color, and with the hostas that I particularly love. So that wraps up our tour. We're wrapping up under a couple white pines, and I hope you've enjoyed the garden tour, and I hope I always call it my happy place. I love being in my flower beds, and I hope that it's brought some happiness to you today in your home, and I hope that you've been able to to see some plants and some flowers that will bring you some joy.